Number 925, Southeast Flexibility, Asian Power Grid. Power system flexibility is a key enabler of clean energy transition and the building blocks of system flexibility. Power system flexibility are first, technical flexibility, power plant flexibility, ramp rate, minimum stable level, startup time, electricity grids, storage, demand response, and uses, including EVs, digitalization. Contractual institutional flexibility without takeover pay obligations, PPAs, fuel contracts, and cross-border power trade, curtailment conditions, ancillary services. Third, last, modern operational practices, forecasting requirements, close to real-time scheduling and dispatch, sizing of operating reserves, coordinating dispatch across balancing areas. To integrate a growing share of variable renewables, it is critical to maintain flexibility through technical, contractual, and modern operational practices. The power system of South Asia today is dominated by baseload fossil fuel generation technologies. In many cases, generation is provided under rigid contractual agreements subject to PPAs and fuel supply contracts. An increasing proportion of electricity generation is set to be provided by variable renewable energy via VRE, and installed renewable capacity will need to increase for 30% of total capacity in 2020 to 50% by 2025 for the region to achieve its renewable targets. In the SDS, VRE, wind and solar PV provides 18% of electricity generation in 2030, up from around 2.5% in 2020. To integrate a growing share of variable renewable electricity against the backdrop of rising electricity demand, it is critical to maintain the reliability, flexibility, and security of electricity grids. Flexibility is required across a wide range of timescales, from very short-term, sub-seconds to seconds, short-term, minutes to hours, medium-term, days to months, and long-term, seasons to years. Ensuring this flexibility requires a variety of approaches. Prominent technical flexibility resources include power plants, both conventional and variable renewables, electricity grid, including cross-border interconnectors, energy storage, and distributed energy resources, including demand response and electric vehicles. It is likely that flexibility needs for the medium term, week to months, can be met by utilizing existing assets, particularly power plants and grid assets, by introducing new operational practices and changing the way they operate, supplemented by investment in network infrastructure and storage options, including demand response. Construction structures and institutions also play a key role in unlocking flexibility, since they facilitate the optimal dispatch of power plants in the system. Though having a flexible contractual structure is not an easy task due to the long-term nature of the contract. Southeast Asia has a variety of different power sector structures. Singapore and the Philippines have liberalized markets with retail competition and system operations that are unbundled from generation. Thailand and Indonesia have vertically integrated structure with state-owned utilities that are responsible for both generation and grid operation. And Vietnam is currently transitioning toward a wholesale electricity market. For Indonesia and Thailand, electric utilities also act as a single buyer, purchasing bulk electricity from independent power producers, IPPs, and PPAs and fuel supply contracts. Liberalizing markets and unbundling can often provide additional flexibility for power systems, but there are also other contractual options to promote it for countries in this region that do not have markets. Commercial flexibility, which is provided by underlying contractual structure and intuitions in the power sector, plays a crucial role, facilitates the optimal use of the technical flexibility resources. For example, PPAs could be adapted to better reflect the technical flexibility of power plants, such as ramp rate, minimum stable operating levels, and startup times in providing system services. Modern system operation practices provide another mechanism to foster the more flexible use of technical assets, particularly power plants and grids. This includes real-time monitoring and dispatch, forecasting, and system services, example ancillary services, which help address the technical and economic concerns relating to high share of VRE. Fossil fuels are the main source of technical flexibility in the countries of Southeast Asia, but low-carbon technologies and storages are set to play an increasing role. Share of generation technologies in providing energy peak demand and system services in Indonesia of 2019 and 2030. Yeah, hydro and geothermal is more important. Southeast Asia has a large and relatively young fleet of coal and gas-fired power plants. Minimum take generation and renewable will exceed peak demand to 2030 in many countries. Capacity weighted average age in 2021 and in 2030 of power plants in Southeast Asia, and minimum takes obligation in a case to 15% share of variable renewables in 2030 peak demand for Thailand during 2020-2030. Yeah, renewables maximum is more and more. There are many technical options available to provide power system flexibility, but boosting contractual flexibility is needed to make the best use of technical flexibility resources. Power generation capacity in Southeast Asia increasing significantly in the coming decades in both the STEPS and SDS, and the bulk of generation capacity additions comes from VRE sources. This new capacity will require increasing levels of flexibility. In Southeast Asia, coal and gas thermal power plants currently provide the major source of electricity generation and flexibility. Many of these assets are relatively young. For example, the current average age of the coal plants in Thailand and Indonesia is between 5 and 10 years old, young. Southeast Asia also has a very diverse range of renewable energy resources, potential that could provide low carbon sources of flexibility, including bioenergy, hydropower, geothermal, and potential for ocean energy. Batteries can also be deployed to boost the flexibility of countries' power systems. In Southeast Asia, there is a heavy reliance on physical PPAs, especially in the vertical integrated power systems such as Indonesia and Thailand. Many of the existing coal and gas-fired power plants in the region were financed with physical PPAs with large capacity payments and or minimum take provisions, which are subject to take-or-pay obligations. Physical PPAs has historically been an efficient way to incentivize investment in regions dominated by coal and gas-fired power generation, and that have been rapid growth in electricity demand, as experienced in Southeast Asia during the 1990s. However, if dispatchable assets or entities have a contract that ensures operators a minimum load each day, then the assets have no incentive to act flexibility. The merit order is effectively changes in these power systems, making it more financially attractive for system operators to run baseload generation and curtail renewables. Adapting contractual structures is important, but this needs to be carried out carefully to avoid negatively impacting investor confidence. One opinion is to hold auction for lowering guarantee minimum production levels. Plants willing to operate on these terms at the lowest cost would be selected for restructuring. This would be voluntary and based on competitive bidding to allow generators to provide flexibility to the system. In Thailand, the potential cost savings from flexible TPS and fuel supply contracts are significantly greater than possible savings from flexible power plants and storage options. operational cost saving from flexible fuel supply contracts in Thailand in 2030. Yeah, flexible contract fuel cost is very high. Adapting minimum take obligations in PPAs and fuel supply contracts can help to make the most of technical flexibility options. To analyze the effect of contractual flexibility issues in Southeast Asia, the IEA conducted the Thailand Power System Flexibility Study, which shows that contractual inflexibility is the greatest barrier to running a cleaner power system at affordable cost, since it prevents the use of otherwise available and cost-optimal resources in the system. For example, there are minimum take obligations in the physical PPAs between EGAT, the system operator in Thailand, and the private power producer. In a scenario with a high share of VRE, 15% in 2030, and high wind and solar PV production during peak demand, the combination of minimum take generation and renewable production always exceeds peak demand in all years to 2030. The inflexibility of PPAs prevents adjustment of this high level of minimum take obligations, meaning that renewables would likely need to be curtailed to ensure power system adequacy. An additional factor impacting technical flexibility options is presented by fuel supply contracts, as many existing fuel contracts in Southeast Asia have strict minimum take-or-pay obligations. This means that coal and natural gas-fired power plants have very low marginal cost, as the fuel is effectively a sunk cost. Even if the generation asset is incentivized to provide system services, it may be more economical to continue to provide baseload generations. Fuel supply contracts can hinder flexibility even if the PPA structure has appropriate incentives for the producers to provide flexibility. The cost saving from shifting towards more flexibility PPAs and fuel supply contracts could be significantly greater than the saving from investing in technical flexibility resources. Designing fuel supply and power purchase contracts with sufficient flexibility leaves headroom for lower cost energy sources, such as VRE and technical assets that provide critical system services to participate in the market, resulting in overall cost savings. Portfolio approaches for fuel supply can also be implemented to increase flexibility in a cost-effective way. These approaches mix less flexible long-term contracts that hedge against price fluctuations with more flexible shorter-term contracts. For example, while flexible gas contracts may be more expensive than contracts with stringent take-or-pay conditions, the overall system cost can be reduced with a mixture of contract types to provide flexibility. A portfolio procurement strategy can optimize fuel supply contracts with respect to cost, risk, and flexibility. It is therefore important to evaluate the cost effectiveness of approaches at the system level rather than individual fuel supply contracts. Cross-border interconnections and trade in Southeast Asia and developing electricity interconnections and trading partners in South Asia and beyond. Following Indonesia to Malaysia, from West Kalimantan, exposed mainly to Malaysia. Multilateral trade arrangement for cross-border power trade can also boost flexibility. Power system flexibility can also be boosted in Southeast Asia through multilateral power trading. This can allow for efficient resources sharing, particularly for renewable resources. For example, the hydropower resources in Lao PDR could provide flexibility to Vietnam and Thailand via exports, and via Vietnam could in turn export power produced during times of high solar PV output to Lao PDR to minimize curtailment. On Borneo, integration between Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei Darussalam can be highly complementary given the high level of hydro resources in Indonesian Kalimantan, which could also be exported to other regions through interconnectors and cross-border trade. A more dynamic setups for multilateral power trade will increase flexibility in the region and facilitate the integration of VRE and reduce overall system costs. Institutional setups and structures must be adapted to facilitate multilateral cross-border power trade. There are a number of fixed long-term bilateral transfer agreements which can limit flexibility as they are not designed to differentiate imports and exports on a daily or hourly basis. More flexible inter-regional market models could be introduced with elements such as continuous data sharing across borders and frameworks to ensure ease of trade, to avoid prolonged contract negotiation to change transfer schedule. Southeast Asia has a major program of work devoted to developing multilateral power trade, the ASEAN Power Grid APG, which encompasses both building physical infrastructure and creating markets to allow for its efficient utilization. Under the APG, the ASEAN Interconnection Master Plan Study 3 has been developed to provide a comprehensive update on cross-border interconnections with high penetration of VRE. The IEA has also published a study outlining the key steps for Southeast Asia to boost multilateral power trade. Recent developments and plans of inter-regional grid. The Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore Power Integration Project, LTMS-PIP, were jointly agreed in 2014 to study the technical viability of cross-border power trade of up to 100 megawatts through existing interconnections. In 2020, the ASEAN Ministers of Energy meeting announced that they would initiate the project in 2022. This was viewed as a significant step toward realizing the APG. Beyond the LTMS-PIP, Singapore announced that it planned to import up to 4 gigawatts of electricity by 2035, which would form about 30% of total supply. This new supply is expected to be delivered via new interconnectors and supply projects. There are also plans for the Australia-Asia Power Link project to be operational from 2028. This would be the first interconnectional power grid connecting Australia to Singapore. Such project will boost grid interconnectivity and potentially pave the way for setting up market mechanisms for multilateral power trade in the future. That's all. Thank you.